We're living a time of extremes, from the mysterious fulfillment of ancient prophecies to AI in our world and computer chips in our bodies. It's clear that the rules have changed. To make sense of the emerging world, here's everything you need to know. There's something inside of you that is so rare, so precious, so ancient, so beautiful, so powerful, that there are forces in this world, forces on this planet. There are powers in this world that will stop at nothing to deny you access to those forces. What is it? What is it that lives within you that holds so much power? And I want you to really think about this. In the last episode, we talked about the power of human divinity, episode number 1. The power of divinity is the power that frees us from fear. The power of divinity is the power that is inherent in the very definition of divinity, the ability to transcend our perceived limitations, to become more than the limits that we have thought were true in the past, to expand those limits. When we look at the world around us, we are living a time of extremes. And I think that is obvious to most people, from social extremes to political extremes, economic extremes to climate extremes, to refugee extremes, to religious extremes, to emotional extremes. All of these things are real. They're all playing out in our lives. But I want to be really clear about what I'm saying. In no way am I denigrating the value of those extremes or the role that they're playing in our lives. They're real. We have to deal with them, and there are ways of doing that in a healthy way. However, and I want to be clear about this, in many respects, all of those extremes and more have become diversions in our lives. They become the distractions by design that have been implemented to keep us distracted from the power that lives within us. And for the most part, they have been effective in the past. If you think about this, you look at the events of the world, and if you are plugged in at all to any kind of mainstream media, you don't even have to own a television set. If you walk through an airport, all the airport televisions are tuned into CNN. That is in the United States. That is where most of the public gets their news if they're traveling day in and day out. When you see the events every day, gives us something to get spun up about. A plane crash here, which is very real and very concerning. A war there, which is very real and very concerning. Social issues, gender issues, political issues, abortion issues, racial issues, religious issues, they're all real. They're all real. But I want you to think about what's happening. They're being used rather than these issues being shared in a kind way so that we can talk about them and allow ourselves to be a stronger society. These issues are all being weaponized. They're being weaponized to divide us from one another, from our own children, from our own families, from our own friends, from our own communities. I know this firsthand. I've lost friends since 2020. I have lost friends because of the conversations that I'm having to empower you, to empower my global family, my community, and the people that I love. There are colleagues that I have that simply cannot have this conversation, are not willing to have the conversation, are afraid of having the conversation, that no longer speak to me. And some of them and it's very sad. Now, I personally believe that there's a pendulum in place. That pendulum is swung way, way to one side. I think the pendulum will come back, and all those friendships at some point, hopefully in the near future, will be reaffirmed. But for right now, I'm acknowledging that the conversation I'm having with you is not always easy, but it's necessary because we're living a time of extremes. This is not business as usual. The extremes that we're seeing, they're unsustainable. They can't go on forever. The world cannot sustain the tension that we're living right now. And it won't, because as I mentioned in episode 1, we're in the midst of a process. It has a beginning and an end and a sequence. What I want you to think about is this. All of those things that I just mentioned that you're seeing in the world, as important as they are, I want you to think about them. I'm inviting you to look at how you may have allowed them to become distractions in your own life. Not that they don't need attention, but if all of your energy is focused and spun up in the fear and uncertainty of the events happening and the feeling there's nothing you can do about it, that will effectively distract you or me or anyone, we're in this together, from awakening the power of our own divinity. Now, I'm saying this for a reason, because you have been conditioned to believe, as have I. And this started for me, again, when I was in school back in 1950s, 60s, early 70s. And we're still teaching our young people today that we are a flawed form of life, Flawed, flawed, that we're a flawed form of life. And because of our flaws, we need something outside of our bodies to be the best version of ourselves, to be competitive in the world. And that something means that we are seeing ourselves as victims, and out there somewhere there's a savior. And that savior is being touted as technology. We're all being told we need to embrace this technology, whether it is the AI in our lives, the computer chips in our bodies, chemicals in our blood, the nanosensors that are circulating now through our circulatory systems and our respiratory systems. We're being told that if we can just embrace these things, we'll be safer, life will be easier, we'll be happier. Here's what I want you to know. I mentioned in episode 1 the power of human divinity. It is the goal of the struggle between good and evil to deny our divinity. Why? Why would there be so much effort over thousands of years to keep us distracted from this power? And if you think that's not true, I want you to think about this. The powers that be will stop at nothing to keep you and me distracted. Nations have gone to war against nations to keep you and I distracted. Armies have destroyed armies. Societies have been collapsed. Banking systems have been collapsed. Climate has been engineered. Diseases have been engineered. Lies have been told, lies have been accepted to keep you and I distracted from something inside of us. Why? Why would any powers, any forces, any governments, any organizations expend the energy, the time, the money, the forces to keep us so distracted? And the reason is what I'm going to say to you right now. It's because you are the prize. You are the prize. You're the prize that no one is talking about. It is your humanness and your access through your humanness to your divinity that is worth the time and the energy and the money and the human lives that have been expended to keep you distracted, so that you cannot realize the deep truth of who you are, so that you are not willing to accept your own power because you're using that energy to shield yourself from the fear that has been created. You are the prize. Why are you the prize? Now, I mentioned divinity. Here's the deal. The divinity is only possible in this world through a human body, through your biology. Divinity. Let's talk a little bit more about what divinity really is. I gave examples in episode 1 of the expressions of divinity: empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, forgiveness, healing, those kinds of things. Everyday divinity. Let me just share with you some very simple examples. I had the opportunity a few years ago to go to the Grammy ceremonies, not the main event, but the peripheral Grammy ceremonies in the music industry. My wife is a voting member of the Grammys. She invited me to go, and of course I accepted. And I took the opportunity. Every musician that I spoke with, whether they were performing artists or they were studio musicians, everyone I asked, I said, when the words to those lyrics, when those lyrics came to you, or when that powerful piece of music came to you, I said, where did it come from? Where did that come from? And I want you to know that every one of those people gave me exactly the same answer. They didn't even all know one another, and they still gave me exactly the same answer. And what they said was this, that those lyrics didn't come from me. That music didn't come from me. You know what I'm going to say here. It came through me from somewhere else. Divinity is the part of us that is timeless. It is ageless. It is all knowing. It is our love. It is our compassion. It is our forgiveness. It doesn't live inside of our physical bodies. And this is one of the places where science is really struggling in a very interesting way. Because science believes that we are it. They can't measure anything beyond the human body, so they believe that we are it. Let me share with you an experiment that is forcing scientists now to begin to think a little bit different, at least telling them they're not quite on the right track. I think many of you are old enough to remember a game. The first widespread computer game came out in 1972. I certainly remember this. When computers, not everyone had a computer in their house. Not everyone, they didn't have desktop computers, laptops. Back at that time, computers were relatively rare. Most of the time, they were at the workplace. The computers were off in a big room somewhere because they were big machines. And we had these CRTs, these monitors on our desks that were tied into those big computers. So it's a very different world than we have today. So when a computer game, a very primitive computer game, was released in 72, it was a big deal. The name of the game was Pong, P-O-N-G. And Pong was essentially a little tennis game on a computer screen. You had a cursor on the right side, cursor on the left side, a line in the middle that was represented the net, and you had a little puck that would go back and forth, and that was it. People were mesmerized. They would spend hours in front of the computer screen playing Pong at work on company time. I saw this happen. A lot of other people did too, because it was addictive. It was addictive at that time. Well, here's the reason I'm sharing this with you. That game Pong was pervasive in the Western world, in the modern world, okay? 2022, scientists did an experiment. Let me just describe this at a very high level. They took some neurons and put them into a petri dish. Now, I want to emphasize the neurons were not connected to a human. These were individual cells in a petri dish. And if you've ever seen neurons, you know they have what look like little tentacles. They're called the dendrites that extend from the central cell. And they took a computer chip and had little openings called ports, P-O-R-T-S, and they were able to insert some of the dendrites into those ports. So now you have a silicon neuron interface. You've got biology and technology interfacing together, okay? They put that chip into a computer that was loaded with the game Pong, and to the amazement of the scientists, those neurons in a petri dish began playing the game of Pong. Not only did they play the game, but the more they played, the better they got. They were learning from the experience. All right, now think about what's happening. These are neurons that are not connected to an organism. They're not connected to any organism. They're in a petri dish hooked up to a computer chip. Now they're playing this game Pong. And now here's the quandary the scientists have to come to terms with. Where do the instructions for Pong live? How do those neurons know how to play Pong? Are the instructions inside the neurons? Well, you and I know they're not. And what open-minded scientists have accepted, and this is one of those places where you have to cross the traditional boundaries of the sciences or you're never going to find the answer. Science is so compartmentalized. If you're only looking at biology, you'll never find the answer. If you're only looking at computer science, you're never going to find the answer. So you've got to look beyond that and look at all the discoveries that have been made in the last 20 years in terms of who we are and how we function. What we now know is that the neurons in the petri dish function as biological antennae. All right? Antennae are tuned to a signal. Where does the signal live? In 2012, scientists at the CERN superconducting super collider, whatever you think about CERN, they are doing some real science in addition to all the other experiments that people theorize that are happening. And in 2012, they announced, in fact, that there is a field of energy and information that underlies all of existence. So that now is accepted in the scientific world. Now, indigenous people, and maybe you and I in our circles, we've talked about the field forever. Oh, yeah, it's in the field. Some people call it the Akashic Record. Some people call it the 0 point field. Some people call it the Planck field or the matrix or the divine matrix, or many names. The point is that there is a field that underlies all existence of energy. Energy is information, and that the neurons are antenna that tune to that information. Now, as a little side note, so does everything else. The cells in your body have receptors that tune to that field. The DNA in your body, I'll talk about in future episodes, are now known in the technical journals to be fractal antenna that tune to the field. So where did the neurons get the information to play the game of Pong? Those neurons were tuned to the place in the field where Pong lives from the millions of people that played Pong from 1972 till whenever they stopped. That exists in the field, just like every foreign language. If you're trying to learn Spanish or French or Tibetan or Chinese, there's a place in the field where that information lives from everyone that has ever explored and spoken that language. Same with a musician. As a musician, when I'm not doing this and I'm trying to learn a new piece of music from one of my favorite guitarists, Stephen Vai, is tremendously inspirational to me. He's an amazing human, and he is just an amazing guitarist. And when I'm trying to learn Stephen Vai on my guitar, there's a part of me. It goes through the motions and it feels awkward. And then all of a sudden, one day, it's like, at least for that piece of music, I can kind of do what he's doing. Well, how does that happen? It takes about 72 hours for the neurons to form the neural network, the antenna that tune to the place in the field where the information lives that we are asking ourselves to tune to. So the act of you trying to learn a foreign language, or me trying to learn a new piece of music, or trying to solve a math problem, or innovate a new architecture, whatever it is, when it doesn't come easy, it's the act of us doing it that is the trigger. It's the impetus for the neurons to begin forming the neural network that tunes the place in the field that resonates with what we're asking ourselves to explore. All right. This means our divinity. There's a reason I'm sharing all this. Our divinity doesn't live in here. It lives in the field. That's why it is timeless. That's why it's ancient. That's why it is all-knowing, all-pervasive. This is where your love, your compassion, your forgiveness, your empathy, your sympathy, your imagination, your creativity, your innovation, your ability to forgive are all a part of us that aren't actually embedded in the biological stuff. But the biological stuff is the antenna that allows us to bring it through. The quality of the biological stuff determines the quality of the divinity that we can express. This is why you are the prize. This is why your body is the prize. This is why for generations, you and I have been taught to denigrate the human body, to pollute the human body, to consume commercial foods that steal from us our health and our vitality, that consume liquids, alcohol, for example, that is not good for anyone. There was a story going around a few years ago, even wine. They said, well, wine's good for you. And if you drink wine, I'm not going to take that away. But I want you to know the wine itself is not where the health benefit is. There is a component of the wine called resveratrol that is found in the skin of the grapes that happens to be in a portion of the wine. And that has a lot of good benefits. The penalty you pay is the alcohol in your cells that dehydrates. When I was in college, I did experiments where I took my own cells, and then for science, I bought some alcohol And I put little drops of alcohol, beer, wine, different kinds of alcohol, uh, on the slide next to the cell. And they all do the same thing. When the alcohol touches the cell, it sucks all of the moisture out of that cell. It dehydrates the cell. That's why often you don't feel good if you drink too much. And our goal is to stay hydrated. So, all to say, we have been conditioned to accept things into our bodies through culture and society uh, that are not good for us. All right. One of the consequences is the more that we do that, the harder it is for us to access our divinity. The harder it is because our bodies, the connection between us in that field is not optimized. All right. This is what love really is all about, our self love. Do we love ourselves enough to accept the gift of our humanness? You are the prize. And I want you to know that. This is why I'm saying this to you. Everything you're seeing in the world is happening because of you. Now, it doesn't mean that greed doesn't play a role. Sure, greed plays a role. Power, those that want power. Because this all goes back to what we said in episode number 1. There's a fundamental struggle between good and evil. Those who have a propensity for greed will fall into the evil that allows that greed to become manifest. Those that have a propensity for power will fall into the evil, the expressions of evil that allow them to explore that power and whatever that means. So you are the prize. And the reason I'm saying this is I want you to really get to think differently about yourself. There is something about you that is so rare, so beautiful, so ancient, so precious, so powerful that the world has been defined by the attempts to deny you and me access to that power. It is the power of our divinity that is only possible through the human body. Now, what you're seeing is a movement to replace our bodies with technology, with synthetics, with artificial intelligence, computer chips in the brain, chemicals throughout the body, RFID chips under the skin, sensors in the body, nano sensors and transmitters that we breathe in the air and that circulates through our respiratory systems. All of these technologies already exist. And I have to tell you, as a scientist, they're not good, bad, right, or wrong. These are not bad technologies. They can do amazing and beautiful things. It's how they're used. It's the thinking underlying how they're used. That's the missing piece that I talked about in the last episode. We're in a fundamental struggle between good and evil. When evil is allowed to have access to these amazing technologies, they are repurposed for things that are not always good for us. I'm saying this because I want you to have a deeper appreciation for your body, for your humanness, for what it means to be human. In the next episodes, I'm going to explore this even deeper. I'm going to share with you the new discoveries that tell you you are absolutely not what you've been told. You're so much more than you've been led to believe. And it's only now where we're on the precipice. We're on the precipice of giving our humanness away to technology that the science is revealing the deep truth of who we are. So I want to thank you for sharing a little bit of your day with me today and allowing me to share with you how rare and precious you really are, because you are the prize. Thank you, and I look forward to our next.